Massive thumbs up to you, the viewing several. How are you doing? Dom Lawson here with another video thing, an iron sandwich, if you will, whereby I speak into a laptop using only my brain and my voice. Yeah, it's basically me talking about a new record, and this week I was hoping to find something that I really didn't like, but unfortunately I found the opposite. So you just have to listen to me being positive about something again, which must be really, really upsetting for those of you who would rather that I was talking about Nickelback. But anyway, yeah. So this week it's actually out this week. Hopefully, if this video actually goes out this week, it's complicated this because I don't know when it's going out. But anyway. Only complicated for me. I'm sure you don't care. Yes, it's out on Friday the 28th, and it's the new album by Testament, the Bay Area thrash titans, as PRs are often keen to describe their bands. It's usually titans, I've noticed, or legends, even when it's some bands you've never heard of, which is quite funny. But yeah, Testament. So, I mean, I suppose the interesting thing about Testament is, they're not, well, there are many interesting things about Testament if you like heavy metal, but they are probably the band that are most often cited as a worthy recipient of the Big Four kind of status. I mean, obviously, the Big Four it's kind of not really open to argument, is it, really? It's obvious who the biggest four bands were in the thrash metal scene of the 80s, so that's why they're the Big Four. But, there are arguments to be had for Exodus being in there, as they were, kind of in many ways ahead of the game, actually, in terms of, defining the thrash sound. But also Testament. And Testament, actually came a couple of years after the Big Four were already active, so that's why, of course, they don't really qualify. Also, I suppose to some degree they've not enjoyed the same level of commercial success as any of the Big Four. But Testament seem to be the band that, if you talk to the average metalhead about, aside from the Big Four, who do you really like from the thrash era? And Testament always comes up, and there's a reason for that, I think, because one or two slightly iffy albums aside, they've been remarkably consistent over the last, Jesus Christ, 30 years. It's exciting when there's a new Testament album on the way, and I think for some reason, well, there was a period in the 90s, I think, when everyone was flailing around, desperately trying to work out what to do next, when Testament disappeared off the radar a little bit. I mean, certainly I personally love albums like Low and Demonic. I think those are great records. But it was The Gathering. It's strange, The Gathering wasn't a massively successful album, but in 1999 they made The Gathering with Dave Lombardo on drums. And it just seemed to rejuvenate the enthusiasm for Testament on a kind of grassroots level, and that's been building ever since. And it certainly helps that while they've had big gaps between albums, certainly they did for a while, not so much now. They've always been a band that people get excited about. I think and it's not just old farts. I know it's the cool thing to say these days is that the young folk aren't interested in old school heavy metal, but there are still old, new, all kinds of thrash metal bands still around. That music's not going anywhere. It still sounds exciting and vital to me. And Testament are undoubtedly among the foremost purveyors of that kind of music over the last 30 years, with a load of classic albums under their belt. And I think for many reasons, the new album, which is called Brotherhood of the Snake, feels like a big deal, even though perhaps to the kind of trendier, more cynical people, it's probably it's just another Testament album. Who cares? But for some reason, it feels like a big deal. I think the last album, Dark Roots of Earth, was great, but it had a couple of tracks in it that the general consensus, there was a ballad on there, the general consensus, certainly among people I spoke to anyway, was that kind of let the album down a bit, and it wasn't quite as good as The Formation of Damnation, which had been seen as, it was their first album for a decade or so, and that was seen as being a kind of ferocious comeback, But the good news is that Brotherhood of the Snake, I think, is the best album they've made in a much longer time than that. I think it's as good as The Gathering. It may even be as good as their first 3 or 4 albums, all of which are classics in my humble opinion. Well, not very humble opinion, Dom. You're doing a video review, you fucking arrogant cunt. But yeah, it's I'll tell you, there are several reasons why I love Testament and why I think Testament are so strong as a band. And Brotherhood of the Snake is such a brilliant showcase for all of those things. I mean, firstly, they have one of the best writers of riffs in metal, bar none. Eric Peterson is an absolute god when it comes to riffs. He's just got a knack. I think his riffing style, as much as anyone's, possibly Gary Holt outranks him, but apart from that, in terms of defining what thrash metal sounds like, I think Eric Peterson is your man. Secondly, they have the best lead guitarist, one of the best lead guitarists in all of metal, Alex Skolnick, absolutely incredible player, and they have, I think, the best vocalist. I mean, as much as I love James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, Joey Belladonna, or John Bush, depending on your preference, and Tom Araya, Chuck Billy is the best vocalist in thrash metal. He's got the range, he's got the melody, he does the death growls, but he enunciates beautifully, and you hear every single word. And he's a big, terrifying bear of a man, and there's just not, there are a few things that are more metal than Chuck Billy kicking off, I think. So they've got that already. Now, obviously, the lineup of Testament has changed a lot over the years on many occasions. Currently, to my mind, it couldn't be any better. Gene Hoglan, who I'm sure metal nerds and even non-metal nerds will probably realise is one of the greatest drummers in the history of metal, who's played with Dark Angel, he's played with Strapping Young Lads, he's just revered widely. He played on Symbolic, the classic Death album. He's just an incredible drummer. Add to that, and this is one for the bass players and heavy metal bass nerds, if that's a thing out there, Steve DiGiorgio plays bass on this record, and I think that, for me, as a metal fan, a Testament fan, a bass player, it's just fucking brilliant, and the production on this album is so beautifully pitched. Sonically, it's amazing. You can hear everything. You hear Hoglan's drums throughout. Couldn't be anybody else. Amazing. Obviously, ruthlessly precise, but still, loads of swing to his playing. Steve DiGiorgio's bass is really clear in the mix. It doesn't kind of drown out anything. It's perfectly positioned. But my God, it's so exciting as someone who's a fan of Hoglan and DiGiorgio and Testament, to hear this going off it's something else. It really is. And like I say, the production is. I hesitate to say perfect because there's no such thing, I suppose, but it's glorious. This is what a modern metal record should sound like. It's got the real separation between the instruments that you used to get back in the day, instead of this big wad of kind of over compressed everything, but it still sounds really modern. It's Andy Sneaper's mixed it, and it's the usual utterly crushing sound that you'd expect from Sneapy, but it's got a real old school vibe to it as well. It's a really shrewd and very clever kind of blending of the two, which I absolutely love. And when it comes to the songs, my God, if Dark Roots of Earth had a problem, it was too much slow stuff, too many mid-paced ones. There is some mid-paced stuff on this album, undeniably, but for the most part, this is a thrash metal record, and not one that sounds dated. It's not thrash metal in the sense of it sounds exactly like Bonded by Blood, like a lot of kind of retro thrash bands do. This is exactly how thrash metal should sound today, but it's still got, oh man, I get really excited by this album because there are several moments that just absolutely they rip into. The speed of this, it helps when you got Gene Hoglan on the drums, I think. Sorry, I was just looking at the track listing there. It helps when you have Gene Hoglan on the drums, because, of course, he can go like the clappers. And so there are blast beats on this album. I think there's some of the fastest stuff that Testament have ever done on this record. And it's ridiculous. It's so exciting. I try to think of a more kind of scholarly and, insightful way of saying it. It's just ridiculously exciting, Some of the best songs that Testament have ever written as well. It's the opening track, the Brotherhood of the Snake, is killer. I could just go through them all saying this one's killer, this one's killer. Particular favourite, Centuries of Suffering, is brilliant. 3.5 minute thrash face smasher, it's just awesome. And actually, I think my favourite track on the whole album is the last track, The Number Game, and it's a brilliant showcase for what the great chemistry between the musicians in Testament at the moment. I know that that they have spoken in the press about there being certain issues with because of course you have hired hands in the band, and I'm sure Testament is actually only 2 or 3 of them on paper, but obviously if the band start to suffer a decline commercially and all the rest of it, then people are still going to need paying and all the rest of it. So that kind of stuff has been discussed in the press, and it's obviously not a lineup that is going to be for the long haul, I suspect. And yet, it's the best that Testament have probably ever sounded. In terms of the chemistry, it's ridiculous. There's something quite magical about Hoglan and DiGiorgio playing together. It's just got that vibe, and it gives it, the whole thing has got so much energy. The riffs here are ridiculous, but like I say, the final song on the album, The Number Game, it's just got one of those amazing epic kind of a pure thrash metal intro. It could have been written in 1985, but it's so powerful, and then it's just one of those intros that you kind of go rang da 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 dang da 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 dang, that kind of thing, ridiculous. But that something's coming. The fast bit's coming, and although it's a cliche, and although it's very familiar, the formula and all the rest of it, I think that's the magic with thrash metal. Those things have never grown old. They're still exciting in a way that a metalcore breakdown could never be. That was. I understand why that was exciting when it started happening. But when you've heard the same one 300 times, it's like, can't you write a different one? Whereas with thrash, it seems to me the possibilities are still being explored by those that are really gifted and good at it. But anyway, so The Number Game, the final track on the album, amazing. Not front-loading your album with the best songs. I think that's the best song on it. But there are no weak tracks on this record. There's no ballad. There's no, drifting off into kind of mellow stuff for lengthy periods. It's a full-on, balls out heavy metal record by a band that are really fucking good at it. They have the energy of men half their age, the best rhythm section in the fucking business, and the best vocalist kicking off. There's even a song about weed on there called Canna Business. It's a very blatant hymn to the glories of recreational soft drugs. So I can't possibly comment on that one way or another. So I certainly wouldn't advise anybody watching this to experiment with recreational soft drugs. Oh no. But anyway, so Testament, Brotherhood of the Snake. The artwork's great as well, actually. It's got kind of snakes on it, as you can probably imagine. A kind of three-headed snake thing, which is wicked. That's about all I can say about it, really. It's just a fucking brilliant metal album. At a time when, I think that the current trend seems to be to kind of have a pop at anybody who says that they're a heavy metal fan, a metalhead, and devoted to it. I think it's great to have records like this to remind you why you kind of nail your colours to that particular flagpole in the first place. I love all kinds of music, but what's the music that makes me want to run through a wall? It's heavy metal, baby. That's the answer to that. So thanks for watching. I'm going to go away now. Next week, definitely something I don't like, with any luck. Cheers, and don't get lost.